Sunday morning, a St. Patrick's Day visit to Ireland, plus Jeopardy's Ken Jennings, and the Trolls are coming. Listen for
follow these, my requests, that there will be consequences. But the president and the White House have yet to lay out what consequences they have and they want to impose.
My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both.
Hello, I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington, and welcome to America Decides. Well, as millions of Americans watch the total solar eclipse across the heartland of the country today, the presumptive presidential nominees were laying out their plans on two key issues: abortion and student loans. Former President Donald Trump said abortion rights should be left to the states, a position that drew pushback from Democrats and Republicans alike. We're going to have more on that later in the show. But first, President Biden announced new proposals for partial or complete student loan forgiveness today. He did it in the battleground state of Wisconsin. The Biden administration has been working on this since the Supreme Court rejected the president's original plan to address the issue last year. During his speech, the president said the plans his White House is working on could help tens of millions of borrowers.
I will never stop to deliver student debt relief on hardworking Americans, and it's only in the interest of America that we do it. And again, it's for the good of our economy that's growing stronger and stronger, and it is. By freeing millions of Americans from this crushing debt of student debt, it means they can finally get on with their lives instead of their lives being put on hold.
Aaron Navarro and Nydia Cavazos join us now. Aaron is following the president in Chicago, and Nydia is following Vice President Harris, who has been talking about the same issue in Philadelphia. Aaron, let's start with you. This announcement was months in the making. The White House has announced some smaller steps here and there, but this is the big one. So walk us through exactly who would benefit from this plan.
Hello from Chicago, Nancy. Good to be with you. This plan, if it is instituted in the way that President Biden proposed today, pending any, of course, challenges in the courts, would do three things. For those who now owe more than they began with because of interest, this plan would look to waive at least $20,000 worth of loans. It will also look to forgive student loans for those who have been making payments for at least 20 years for undergraduate education before these individuals would have to apply. Under this plan, it would automatically happen. And then the officials also laid out plans, though a bit vague, to create a loan program or loan forgiveness program for those going through, quote, hardships, but they did not specify what that would exactly look like.
Right, and it's vague because they're actually still working through some of these details. It's going to take a few months to get this rulemaking done. Nydia, this is kind of a piecemeal approach. It's obviously not the approach the White House had been hoping to take. They wanted to wipe out $20,000 in debt for every borrower who was making less than $125,000 a year. But that plan, of course, was struck down by the Supreme Court. So how do we know that this new plan will survive court challenges, and when could it take effect?
Nancy, well, as we know, canceling student debt was the main and central campaign promise of the Biden and Harris campaign, and throughout their administration, they've maintained that they're going to be able to accomplish this and meet the promise that they made to millions and millions of Americans that were hoping to get some sort of student debt relief. But of course, as we saw in 2023, the Supreme Court blocked these efforts. And so, of course, now we have a long way to go before any of this student debt relief is actually seen. We, of course, still have the Department of Education that still has to publish the draft or rules so that we can receive public comments. And if once that goes through, then we would be seeing some sort of debt relief up until the early fall. And most people who would benefit under this plan, the Biden and Harris administration is estimating that it's over 20 million people who would benefit. But of course, they won't necessarily be seeing these benefits and these campaign promises come to fruit up until 2025.
Right. So when they go to the polls in November, it will still be a bit far off. Nydia, out on the campaign trail, student loans is one of those issues that really does seem to resonate. People will tell you, well, my loan isn't going to be forgiven, but I do know someone who does qualify. How much of an impact does the campaign think that this is going to have when, as we've been discussing, most of these loans won't be forgiven until well into 2025?
Right, so Nancy, I've been talking to many voters on the campaign trail. This was early on this year, and even I got to talk to some of the voters and students who have student debt out here in Pennsylvania. And what I get is a sense of disbelief. They don't actually think that this is going to come to fruit because it didn't happen initially, and they think that the Supreme Court or this new plan would actually have some sort of legal challenges. So that's sort of the feeling that we're getting from some voters that had the hope on Biden and Harris administration that they would get their student loans canceled. But now, as far as the importance from the campaign, well, we're seeing it with President Biden out in Wisconsin, and we have Vice President here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So that speaks to how important this issue is to the campaign. They recognize the importance. They're still trying to make this promise come to fruit. But we know that it's not only going to be the most important or one of the most important issues out for voters, as we're seeing Harris, whenever she has trips, her recent trips, she's been met with a lot of protesters out here, advocating for issues that matter most to them. We're seeing some dreamers out here who have been saying, the Biden and Harris administration are focused on certain issues, but we as dreamers haven't necessarily seen any sort of solution for us. And of course, we're always met with protesters here who are calling for a ceasefire and who shout "Free Palestine" whenever Vice President arrives. And we know she's inside the school right now, and she's talking on she's focused on student debt, but we have voters out here who, aren't necessarily worried about that. They have other issues on their mind.
You make a really interesting point, which is that it's not very often you have the White House sending out both the president and the vice president to different places to talk about the same issue, the way you've got the president talking about student loans in Wisconsin, the vice president in Philadelphia. Aaron, not sure why they tried to counter-program against the eclipse with a lot of people distracted, but nevertheless, you spoke to Congressman Steve Horsford today. He's the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. What did he have to say about this issue and whether he thinks it's going to break through for voters?
That's right. Congressman Horford is in one of those swing districts in a swing state in Nevada. He was here in Chicago to speak to DNC convention staffers, just to kind of introduce himself, kind of hear about the convention. But I asked him after he spoke to these staffers about the student loan program that Biden talked about. And he was adamant that it wasn't just young voters that could benefit or that would gravitate towards President Biden because of this action, but voters overall. I asked him, though, if there is an issue that the president's campaign has in terms of messaging with young voters and letting them know about his policies. Take a listen to his answer.
I have encouraged the campaign to do, and they're doing it, is to meet people where they are. I'm in a competitive district. I don't take anything for granted. People need to see the record between what we've had under President Biden and Vice President Harris or what we could have under Donald Trump.
And throughout our chat, he kind of foreshadowed how the Biden campaign and Democrats would message in terms of if this act or these actions are stopped by Republican judges. He repeatedly referred to MAGA forces potentially blocking some of these proposals from actually being enacted. So it's kind of showing how the Biden campaign is preparing in case some of these actions don't fully get instituted. Right.
They want credit for at least trying to push this through. Aaron Navarro in beautiful Lake Michigan waterfront, thank you so much. And Nydia Cavazos in Philadelphia, thank you as well. A growing number of Democrats on Capitol Hill are calling for the Biden administration to halt weapons transfers to Israel. One of them joins us next. You're streaming America Decides.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
Just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell. I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Stories start with the who, what, when, and where. But it's why it's important to you that matters most. Knowing what to ask is how you open the door to a deeper understanding. See you on Primetime, streaming free everywhere.
An original documentary from CBS reports
that Desire Farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Welcome back to America Decides. A growing number of Democrats are expressing their displeasure with the Biden administration's handling of Israel's war in Gaza. One of them is Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen.
I was glad to see the president, at least as reported out, finally say to President Netanyahu that if you don't follow these, my requests, that there will be consequences. But the president and the White House have yet to lay out what consequences they have and they want to impose.
Wisconsin Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan joins us now. He is among a group of 40 Democrats on Capitol Hill who have signed a letter calling on the U.S. to halt weapons transfers to Israel. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. I know you were with the president today in Wisconsin. He was talking student loans, but did you get a chance to talk to him about this issue as well?
I did. I made sure that I told him that we should talk some more, that I've done town halls throughout the district. The last 2 weeks we've been home, and that a couple of reoccurring issues have come up, one of which is Gaza, and people are rightfully so concerned. They're seeing the horrific pictures of devastation, dead children, women, 33,000 people dead, 70% are women and children, and that people really want to make sure we're getting aid to them. So lots to do, and I wanted to make sure I got a chance to share that with the president.
Is there anything you can tell us about how he responded? Did you sense that his position is changing at all?
Yeah, I think he already has been very vocal about a changing position. And I think when you look at the letter we signed, by the way, reopened it today, and I think another 14 people last count have also signed on to it. So it's a growing letter. We're closing at the end of the day, but people are hearing it while we're home. People are saying, look, we've got to make sure that aid is getting to people. Over 200 aid workers have been killed. People are dying of starvation, children in Gaza. We've got to get food and water. And right now we're dropping it from the air and bringing it in for the sea. But honestly, we should be able to bring it through the checkpoints. Since Israel is a good friend of the United States, there's no reason that doesn't happen. a lot has to happen different. I think, the way Benjamin Netanyahu has run this counteroffensive, unfortunately, has turned into a collective punishment of Palestinians in general. And I think that's what I'm hearing from my constituents they're really concerned about.
So far, at least publicly, the White House has been rejecting your position. They say they're not cutting off military aid, that Israel is located in a tough neighborhood. It constantly faces challenges from Iran, from Iranian-backed groups. What is your response to that? I mean, this is a really major move you're suggesting for the U.S. government to cut off aid to Israel, a longtime ally.
Well, not cut off aid. What we're saying is you condition aid, first of all, so that we're not using bombs to kill children in Gaza. And second of all, let's make sure we're getting some real protections for the aid that is getting to people, food, water, medicine. And quite honestly, I've heard the president say a lot of this. I mean, he's not happy with the way Benjamin Netanyahu has run this war. And, at the end of the day, the long-standing United States position has been a two-state solution, recognizing a Israeli nation as well as a Palestinian nation. Unfortunately, Netanyahu does not agree with that. So he's not in sync with U.S. interests. I think it's time for a divorce with Benjamin Netanyahu. We can support the Israeli people as we should. We can support the Palestinian people. But just because some political leaders are not executing things in a way that I think my constituents in Wisconsin think is humane, it means something. And I think the president absolutely understands that.
You talked about the people you've been hearing from at these town halls. What has your message been to progressive voters who say they're considering staying home this November because of the president's stance on the war?
Well, staying home or voting for a third-party candidate often means that is giving an advantage to Donald Trump, right? If you're not voting for Joe Biden. And at the end of the day, Donald Trump is bad at many, many things, including things like abortion, including things like economics. His tax cuts alone added to the national debt, and something like 83% of the money went to the top 1%. Donald Trump is not for the average family in Wisconsin, where Joe Biden has been reducing costs on healthcare and energy, and today on helping people with student loans. I mean, Joe Biden's fighting for that average family in Wisconsin, and we have to make sure that we're supporting him at the same time, making sure he's hearing from us on issues like Gaza. But, Donald Trump would be terrible in this area. I mean, you heard Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, say that talked about what beautiful beachfront property is there. I mean, that's beyond Saturday Night Live ridicule.
Some Israel advocates have argued there shouldn't be a ceasefire until all the hostages are released. Do you agree with that position?
I'm hearing from a lot of people in Israel who want a ceasefire so you can get the hostages. And that's part of, I think, the mistake that Netanyahu made. He had the military protecting people with illegal settlements, Israelis who were making illegal settlements in Palestinian territory at the time of the attack. And I think, people, including many of the families, think that his eye wasn't on the ball. And I think that is something we have to really look at. Benjamin Netanyahu has not handled this even up to October 7th very well. This has been a boiling pot in Gaza for probably decades, but especially in the last few years. So again, I think what I'm hearing from people in my district is concern over the humanitarian conditions. And at the end of the day, I think we have to really hear those people who are, not a bunch of students or progressive advocates, but, my town halls are often attended by a lot of people on Social Security and small communities of 2,000 people. They're the ones who are raising this issue. And that tells me that I think public opinion is significantly different on this issue, and we need to follow that.
Do you think the White House policy on Israel has been clear? You have White House officials all the way up to the Secretary of State saying that if Israel's conduct of this war doesn't change, that U.S. policy is going to change somehow. Is that clear enough for you?
Joe Biden doesn't wear his foreign policy on his sleeve. He has a lot of very private conversations. I've seen this in other areas of how he operates. But he's starting to be more vocal because he's not seeing the results from Israel that he would like to see, and specifically from Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, let's face it, the average Israeli just doesn't want to have bombs raining on them from Gaza. The average Palestinian just wants to be treated with human dignity and respect, and they don't have that right now. They don't have the human rights they deserve. And that both, I think those populations want peace in the region. I just think the way this has been executed has been anything but done in a humanitarian way. And Joe Biden understands that, and he's been vocal on it. And he may not say everything that I'm saying out loud, but I think he's saying many of those things privately because you can't not see these things happening.
Interesting. Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Sure. Thank you.
Former President Donald Trump said today that abortion policies should be decided by the states. We'll take a look at the divisions that's causing within his own party. We're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes. Did you ever have these problems before the derailment? No, ma'am. This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This is CBS.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state.
Welcome back to America Decides. Some Republicans are pushing back vocally against Donald Trump's stance that abortion should be left up to the states. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham said that he, quote, respectfully disagrees. He wants a national ban, 15 weeks. Trump's former vice president, Mike Pence, took it a step further, calling it a, quote, slap in the face to those who had previously voted for Donald Trump. Let's bring on our campaign reporters, Shauna Mizell and Jake Rosen. Welcome to both of you. And Jake, Donald Trump is not taking kindly to this criticism.
No, he's not. He just posted a series of Truth Socials attacking the head of Susan B. Anthony for Life, and also Lindsey Graham, like you just noted. He has not yet attacked his former vice president, but I think we've already seen this posture from the Trump camp that they have now opened up, as Donald Trump just said, the argument for conservatives across the country in November to make the make the election, about other issues, not abortion related. So the economy, the border, things like that. Donald Trump is taking credit for that, calling it a victory now that he's kind of found this will of the people middle ground, as he kind of put it earlier today.
Shauna, there's been a lot of mystery surrounding what exactly Donald Trump's position is on this issue right now. It has changed a lot over time. There's no guarantee that it will stay where it is. But basically, there had been some reporting by the New York Times that he was talking about the idea with advisors about embracing a national ban. Now he says he isn't going to do that. He made it clear in that video that he released that it's purely politics, that he thinks that Republicans can't win if they embrace this national ban. So what does it mean for him and his supporters? Why is he doing this now?
Well, Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, a source there told me that they were really pushing for that 15-week limit. Trump now shying away from that. And Democrats still see this as a winning message. They're still going to continue to campaign on the issue of abortion looking forward. But Trump now saying the issue should be left to the states. And as Jake previously mentioned, really saying now that Republicans will be free to really campaign on the border, something that we know Trump really wanted to make a central issue to his campaign.
Yeah, speaking of Democrats, President Biden wasted no time in putting out a video online talking about what he says Donald Trump's position really is, which is that he'll come into office if elected and essentially embrace a national ban, even if he isn't doing so right now. Take a listen to that.
Donald Trump just endorsed every single state ban on reproductive care nationwide. All across the country, women are being turned away from emergency rooms, or being forced to travel hundreds of miles, or ask a judge just to get the basic care they need. That's Donald Trump's vision for this country. He said it himself. He'd punish women who seek out the care they need. If MAGA Republicans put a federal ban on his desk, he'd sign it.
So, Jake, basically what the president is saying there is if Donald Trump says it's up to the states, that means he supports Florida's upcoming 6-week ban. He supports other red states that have embraced total bans.
Totally. This is the same kind of thing that we've seen from the Biden administration again and again when it comes to what Donald Trump doesn't say in some of these statements. What he also didn't answer was his answer on mifepristone. What is Donald Trump's stance there? And in Donald Trump's home state of Florida come November, when he potentially votes for himself, does he support the abortion amendment there? Another thing Donald Trump didn't mention earlier today, although he did talk about IVF and IVF protections that he would like to see continued. But again, he also didn't talk about what he would like Congress to do on that front either. So Donald Trump left the door open to kind of these 4 different things that, should he get reelected and, those things come from Congress to his desk, it's certainly possible that he would sign an abortion ban of some kind if a House GOP passes it to him.
Shauna, when it comes to abortion, it's not necessarily an issue that many Americans say is their most important issue, but we know it has a proven track record of driving Democrats in particular to the polls, at least in the last 2 years since the Dobbs decision was released. How does the Biden campaign plan to keep this issue in the spotlight between now and November?
So it seemed like the Biden campaign was really locked and loaded to give a response to Donald Trump's stance and announcement here today. They also came out with a campaign ad that features a woman that was impacted by the ban in Texas on abortion. Now, this woman said that she had to leave the state to get an abortion, and she also successfully had a pregnancy a year later, but she needed a DNC. And because that is a procedure regularly done with abortions, that equipment was not readily available to her. And so the Biden campaign is really going to be looking to amplify these personal stories of women and families alike that have been impacted by restrictive abortion bans. And they're also going to be going to battleground states where this could be a ballot measure this November, like Arizona, where you saw the vice president and the president recently just visiting there.
And it wasn't just the president who came out today. You had the vice president speaking as well on camera. Jake, what does the president's position mean now for Republicans who are down ballot, who maybe disagree with him and wanted him to take a tougher line?
Well, it puts the former president in a difficult spot, right? He has to appease kind of these evangelical leaders that he so often meets with and talks with and who were very vocal in getting him elected in 2016 the first time. But he also has to appease these kind of suburban voters like we're talking about, the people who might be more willing to vote for Biden just on this issue of abortion if it is their most important issue. I think the thing for Donald Trump is he's still going to campaign for some of these people in battleground states and counties, but whether he kind of entices them to kind of take the same stance he has, back away from the problem, let Democrats talk about it, and let Republicans take the border, the economy, things like that, I think is yet to be seen. But we've kind of seen the Trump campaign already pivot to do that. Last week they were talking only about immigration and the border, while there are obviously a lot of these abortion measures and news going on that front.
We'll see if he keeps this position or adjusts it after the blowback. Jake Rosen, Shauna Mizell, thank you both so much. Appreciate it. President Biden urged people to be safe during today's solar total eclipse while poking fun at his predecessor. The White House released a short video on social media of the president putting on solar eclipse glasses. He said you should, quote, play it safe and wear protective eyewear. The video shows Biden on the same balcony where former President Donald Trump famously looked up at the sky without glasses during a solar eclipse in 2017. A very memorable moment. Some lawmakers on Capitol Hill were wearing glasses when they took a break this afternoon to enjoy today's eclipse. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer observed it from the balcony of his office, while Senate Majority Whip Dick Durbin stepped outside to take a look. Lots of fun out there. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News. Have a good one.
Washington is the seat of power, national security, foreign policy, global economics.